In the Championship, the title race saw two sides score free kicks and grab victories. Fleming slamming Burnley in front, Harmer charming at Bramall Lane. Alarming scenes in Leeds, whose keeper treats the ball like a hot cross bun, dropping crosses for fun. Luton are determined to stay up come hull or high water. Stoke's goals flow through Junho and Junior Chamado. Borough's weekend the most tremendous among the playoff contenders. In League One, the top five all win, as do Reading to head into the top six. Noel Hunt's Hunters become the hunted, but they've got a savage in their team. Crawley score 4 to put the Millers to the sword. So far, so good for their returning Scot. But the end of the road for Rotherham's. Evans knows I'm miserable now, the vibe at the New York Stadium, sacked on Sunday. In League Two, Tranmere very handy under Andy. Grimsby passed the Colchester test to cement 7th spot, and all hail Port Vale, Stockley heading them into 3rd. All that and more on this week's NTT20 Monday pod. We're the #1 EFL podcast. I'm Ali Maxwell, and he's George Elek. You all right?
Yes, I'm okay. How are you?
Good, really well. Lots to get into today, not least at the very top of the Championship, where it was, as it tends to be at this stage of the season, a very significant weekend, with capital letters on very significant, and weekend. George, it kicked off with Sheffield United almost wiping the floor with Coventry, beating them 3-1 at Bramall Lane. Then we saw Burnley beat Bristol City 1-0 with relative comfort, and Leeds conceding deep into injury time. In fact, the latest goal scored across the whole of the EFL in the 3 p.m. kickoffs, which meant it was, as we're hoping and expecting it to be every weekend, very dramatic indeed.
Yeah, this feels like the first weekend where it goes from being like relatively interesting to, hold on, this has been completely shaken up by events over the course of the whole weekend. The fact that Sheffield United were playing on the Friday night gave them a massive opportunity to set out a marker, I guess. But realistically, this was also a difficult game at home to a Coventry side who are one of the informed teams in the whole league. And to play on Friday, had they lost the game or had they dropped points, it would have been a massive opportunity for the teams chasing them to try and make up some ground. They were brilliant on the day. You know, it was a game where coming into it, I think Coventry fans would have felt some hope and expectation that they'd be able to take the game to Blades. And even though the first goal came by way of a set piece, Sheffield United, who are a team who we've said on many occasions in recent weeks and in recent months and over the whole season really, have edged out teams in really tight games. This, I would say, was a game where they dominated and were fully deserving of their 3-0 lead before Coventry made it 3-1 in injury time. The fact that it was Gustavo Harmer, a player that Sheffield United bought or signed, I should say, from Coventry, will further frustrate Coventry fans. I think it's a sign of the gap, I guess, between teams who get promoted to the Premier League and those trying to get into it. That a player like Harmer, who can be too good seemingly for the level, can get a Premier League move and then be back scoring free kicks against the team that he left relatively soon afterwards. It was a great free kick. I personally, Don Goodman on Coventry said that we couldn't blame Dovin. I think the keeper should have done better personally. I think he seems to get across to the shot and it's a pretty flimsy hand that can't keep out what was a very well struck free kick. The quality of the second goal, I think, is the one that really stood out to me. A brilliant ball from Harmer down the right-hand side. Sariki kind of tussling with the defender and coming away with the ball. A brilliant cross in and such a sharp finish from Tyrese Campbell, who we praised a lot recently for his finishing ability, albeit he later had an air shot, which he was unable to divert home from a kind of similar-ish move. Before the points were kind of made safe, I guess, by Ryan Brewster, who continues his better goal-scoring form. It was just a really dominant win. And, given events on Saturday, for the first time, it kind of looks like it could be the performance of champions.
Yeah, I think the most I've enjoyed a Sheffield United performance all season, dare I say it, their best performance of the season, I'm sure over whatever it is, 38, 39 games. I'm probably missing something. But I also think it's just so significant from a psychological point of view when you consider that we had the international break, which meant no championship games the weekend before. We've had 2 weeks essentially since Sheffield United beat Sheffield Wednesday, and all the emotion of that and what it meant for the league table on that weekend. I've had 2 weeks for all three of these teams, Sheffield United and Burnley and Leeds, to just kind of cook in their own juices, if you like. And by that, I mean, think about the situation that they're in. Think about what might happen. Think about things that could make you feel nervous as well as excited. And I think the performances and the way that these games pan out straight off the back of international break, with a very clear 8 games to go, 2 of us are going to go up automatically and 1 will miss out. I think the way that these teams approach these games, the way that Sheffield United attacked this game, reflects unbelievably well on them and on the mentality of the team, and the way that Wilder has them feeling, basically, with now 7 games to go. I felt like they just smashed Coventry really all over the park, with aggressiveness, physicality, but also good football, playing forward at speed, good movement off the ball, the front four, especially with some good movement in transition. And, you mentioned Femi Siriki. What a standout performance from him. Surely the best performance and the most notable performance of his young career so far. Someone that's had loans previously, someone that Sheffield United have been keen to keep around, have clearly seen the potential in what he could be if he develops as a right back and a right wing back. And I think maybe we're seeing him having taken that leap now, because, wow, I mean, when you think about a fullback and a wing back, what do you want to see from them in a really good performance? Just dominating their flank. And I think he absolutely did that, again, with aggression and physicality, ability to get up and down at speed, but also with what he did on the ball and in the tackle as well. So a really standout performance, I thought, from Blades Academy player in Femi Siriki. He was part of the Bury Academy when that club folded, as were quite a lot of players that had dotted around the EFL. Callum Stiles came through there as well. And the upshot is Sheffield United are top of the table. In fact, only Leicester in 2013-14 and Reading in 05-06 have won more points after 39 games than they have done this season. They are now the team to be shot at, the team to beat, and they are therefore the team that might feel a couple of extra nerves ahead of the next set of fixtures. But the way they coped with this one certainly makes you confident that they can handle it. You could probably say the same for Burnley, George, who beat Bristol City 1-0. And yes, it was a free kick from range from Fleming. And yes, I also felt like you did for the Sheffield United goal, that the goalkeeper O'Leary, having more or less got across his goal to plant his feet to make the dive, then just didn't really dive across and tip the ball over. Regardless, there can be no real argument over who deserved to win this game on the balance of play.
No, for sure. I mean, you're right in terms of the goal itself being from a set piece, albeit it was a bit of quality from Zian Fleming, although, as you mentioned, maybe the keeper should do better, but it was still a really dominant performance. This is a team taking the lead after 50 minutes at home to a Bristol City side chasing the top 6, and a Bristol City side under Liam Manning who have a really good record against teams who dominate possession and against the better teams in the league, and they just dominated it completely. Bristol City had relatively few chances, even fewer from open play. I think there were 4 shots from Bristol City in the whole game, 2 of which were from set pieces. And Burnley didn't carve out anything too clear cut, but were able to see the game out relatively comfortably, with O'Leary making a couple of saves you'd probably expect him to make. So, this was more dominance from Burnley. This was another day where they've maintained their really good defensive record, their good defensive shape. They've prevented a decent attacking side from creating anything of note, and their attacking output continues to be far better than it was a couple of months ago. So, this was another performance that says to me right now, I mean, it's really interesting. You've got a Leeds side who, I still believe are the best team in the league over the course of the season, but clearly have issues right now in terms of winning games. You've got a Sheffield United side who've just put in possibly their best performance of the season, who've maybe flattered, who've maybe run a little bit hot in recent times. Burnley are the ones who right now feel like they are bang at it in terms of both performance level and results on a fairly consistent basis. And it's all, it's with Leeds properly now in this 3-horse race, this game coming up between Burnley and Sheffield United. I mean, what could that be when it comes to pass? I mean, that's going to hold all the keys for the title race, for the promotion race, and it feels pretty unlikely that any of these teams are going to drop away before that comes around in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, no wobble when it comes to Burnley and that performance at Bristol City, who did such a good job of performing and competing with Sheffield United at Bramall Lane the other week, not able to do so against this Burnley side. Bang at it, keeping yet another clean sheet, which I think at this stage we take for granted, but really should never be taken for granted. And what of Leeds United, George? 2-2 draw with Sunderland. Had, you'd say, the easiest fixture of the three on paper. Had a very good record in 3 p.m. games at Ellen Road this season. 6 wins out of 6 in the league, 21 goals scored, none conceded, and went ahead in the first minute when Brendan Aronson, in quite sort of typical Brendan Aronson form, tackled the ball into the goal. But when you have a player like Aronson, whose main skills are basically his ability to run all day and press and tackle, and much less so a technician, much less so someone with particularly strong execution with his shooting and his passing, but clearly valued by the manager for what he can do without the ball. I did have a chuckle when I saw that he essentially just tackled the ball into the net. Then a penalty save, Rodon giving away a penalty, O'Brien buying a foul off in, and Meslier making a big save, and maybe that was the moment that Meslier and the Leeds fan base came together and said, "Mais oui, it is time to go and get this done with me wearing the gloves between the sticks." But no, Swansea had one off the post from a set piece. Rare forays forward, but when they did have them, they did cause some problems for Leeds. Meslier eventually dropping a corner, swung in by Timon, the feet of Darling, who stabbed home. Then Leeds pressure at 1-1. Leeds goal, 2-1, Willy Gnonto near the end. And that should have been that, but a Leeds throw-in that wasn't secured by Joseph, the ball given away, slipped ball through down the right-hand side of the box from Allen, and Vipotnik absolutely slamming it low and hard into the corner, a shot that people feel Meslier should have done better with. It certainly is not a clanger on the same level as Swansea's first equalising goal, George. I said there's no wobble for Burnley. I said Sheffield United put in their best performance of the season. How do you begin to dice this up when it comes to Leeds and such a strong negative reaction? Is this just a goalkeeper issue that will surely be fixed if Farke realises that Carl Darlow can save shots and catch crosses, or is there something wider at play?
It's so hard to say. I mean, the funny thing about this is that Meslier looked incredibly confident, I thought, in the first half of this game. The penalty save, he turned to the Leeds fans after the penalty save in kind of a together gesture, a focused gesture. He made a couple of kind of really good bits of handling before that. And he's been okay for the last 6 weeks or so. Made some important saves, and the penalty save itself should have been an important save. The clanger here is clearly the drop cross, and it's hard to imagine that the game would have gone the way it had done had he not dropped that cross. Like if you take out the penalty and you take out the chance that presented itself to Darling off the back of the drop cross, Swansea still created very little. Yes, they hit the post from a kind of a long range effort, but in terms of actual chance quality and creation, they created very little. I also kind of think, and this is just a thought around game state, where when you're a team as dominant as Leeds are, maybe scoring in the first minute kind of brings the opposition out of their shell a little bit and changes the game somewhat, and obviously that can result in Leeds going on to batter sides, as we've seen in the past. And I definitely think the whole scoring too early thing is a little bit of a myth, because your probability of winning games is always going to increase after you score a goal. But there's an element here where maybe the game wouldn't have been quite so chaotic and end to end had Leeds not taken the lead so early, and had Swansea had to look to contain for longer than basically 30 seconds in the game. I completely agree with what I think you were hinting at. Like, I think if Meslier saves that shot from Vipotnik, the narrative isn't, well, yeah, it's a save he should make. The narrative is redemption for the player that's just made a howler from dropping across. Like, I don't think it was a goal he should have let in, but I don't think it was an absolute clanger at all. Vipotnik hits it incredibly hard. From that angle, probably it's the place where you want to hit it is low, hard, down by the keeper's legs, because it's incredibly difficult to get down fast enough to do it. And it wasn't like he spilt it or anything like that. Yeah, I can completely understand why Leeds fans, with such an emotional stake in this, will point the finger at Meslier and say he should do better, and maybe he should do better. But I'm not having that at all as being, Melior's thrown it in or cost them the game, albeit, as we say, the mistake for the first goal is bad, but he makes a penalty save earlier. So
I think there's like a second finger maybe being pointed even more strongly now, because almost what's the point of pointing the finger at Meslier if you're a Leeds fan? You've known this about him for over 2 years now. But we were told that when Farke walked around the pitch at the end, the reaction to that and boos and howls of derision ringing out, this is a terrible time of the season to be hearing stuff like this. And and essentially the question is, what on earth is he doing? Basically undermining himself and his team. And you can see the way the defenders look at Meslier when he makes these errors. They're we're one of the best defences that this league's ever seen, mate. And it's just like, what? Why? The answer is probably that he feels loyalty being shown will give confidence to his goalkeeper, and he thinks that technically this is a goalkeeper that is sound. But it's constantly undermining the team and the results.
But I'm sure the thing is, he probably would have, if you'd asked him before the game, how happy are you with Ilya Meslier at the moment? I think he probably would have suggested that his decision to retain the faith in Meslier after a really difficult passage earlier in the year had been justified, because he hadn't, as of recently, he'd been pretty good. He'd been okay. Like, he hadn't made big errors. And certainly after the penalty save, it felt like that as well. But when there's such a crushing narrative around a player, and in Melier's case, it's justified because, as we discussed, I think that had Mike Cooper or James Trafford been in goal for Leeds this season, the league would be over. Yeah. Such is the difference in terms of the quality of the keeper that their rivals have compared to the mistakes that their keepers made. But it's one of those things where you can have a quiet 2 months in terms of the criticism, and then you have one bad game and suddenly it's like, what the hell is he doing again? This is crazy. It'll be interesting to see how he approaches it next. I would also say that from a position of being 2-1 up that late in the game, the fact that the goal from Vipotnik comes from a Leeds throw-in where Firpo just kind of launches it up the pitch. It's a terrible touch from Matteo Joseph facing his own goal, where he basically gives the ball back to Swansea. It's a terrible attempt at a tackle from Al Tanaka, who just looks knackered and basically just leaves the leg dangling and can't get there. There's way more. I think the kind of the complacency to concede a goal from that position with that game state goes a lot further back than just the Meslier not making the save himself. I agree with you where when Meslier probably sees Rodon and other players, reacting the way that they do when he drops the cross, that's not going to help what comes next. And it kind of feels like with Leeds and with Meslier, it's the same thing where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where, I don't believe for a second that there is an intrinsic soft centre to Leeds United. But when the fans kind of believe that there is, when the neutrals kind of believe that there is, then do the players kind of start thinking maybe there is, and then that becomes the norm. Like it's a straight. But right now it feels like the intangibles, mentality, will to win, ability to get over the line. These are the driving forces of what's happening in the top three right now, rather than quality or performance level or anything like that.
Yeah, that brings back to my kind of overarching point about this weekend. Heading into it, I'm putting a lot into how do these teams look after sitting on their hands for 2 weeks and the reality of their situation, being laid bare and being more and more obvious to them. How do they respond to that? And, without wanting to go overboard, because Leeds should have won this game, I still think that in Rodon's foul, in, the set piece that gets flicked onto the post, and in other aspects of the game, they showed more signs to me that they're less comfortable in this situation than Sheffield United and Burnley. But as we know, it could all look and feel very different next Monday. I mean, Burnley go to Coventry, Sheffield United go to Oxford, and Leeds go to Luton. So, at this stage of the season, it feels like every fixture is incredibly difficult, but all three of those are difficult in their own ways. Some credit for Swansea. It must have been an amazing away day for their fans who haven't had a particularly fun season. Sheehan is now in charge until the end of the season. Interesting approach this, because, he's obviously results-wise, it hasn't been great since Luke Williams left. Got the win against Blackburn and against Boro, lost against Burnley and against Watford 0-0, and then this, which is obviously one of their best days out of the season, probably away at Leeds, and putting in a good display. He's managed to bring in 2 coaches despite only being retained until the end of the season. One of them, Fotheringham, who was the Huddersfield Town manager, was that last season or the season before, and Richard Stearman as well, who's obviously transitioned from a player into the coaching side. Those are the 2 guys kind of supporting Sheehan at Swansea until the end of the season. So Sheffield United 2 clear of Leeds and Burnley with 7 games to go. God, it's good at the top of the Championship. Sunderland are fourth. They got their 20th win of the season. I thought that was worth pointing out, where, things don't feel that great and that exciting, because of the last couple of months for Sunderland. But it's still a team that have won more than half of their league games this season. And that is a very, very strong performance through 39 games. It was a lovely set-piece goal scored by Try Hume. Nicely worked. He got the free run at the back post and volleyed home. Really, really nice connection. Hume playing left back here with Alan Brown at right back, given injuries to Sirkin and Agialis as well on the left-hand side, which is not ideal from a Sunderland point of view, albeit, their fullbacks are not the most... they do contribute in the final third at times, but they're not absolutely gung-ho like Leeds is. So to have someone like Hume on the left side, I don't think is a disaster necessarily. I think he's a smart enough player to be able to play on his weaker side and still contribute fairly well. And Brown should be all right as a right back, if not natural. A bit of a strange situation where Sunderland won a penalty. It was taken by Luke 09, much to the dismay and distaste and anger of Romain Mundle, who had done very well to win the penalty. And in fairness, having watched what was quite a bizarre penalty technique from 09, sort of did a half hesitation, but not enough to actually send the keeper one way before he struck the ball. And in any case, he was looking down at the ball, so he wouldn't have seen it either way. Felt like he didn't get any of the benefits of the hesitation, to be honest, to the Sutter step, and just passed it straight to the keeper. A 1-0 win for Sunderland regardless, and a relatively comfortable afternoon for them against Millwall. Quite exciting developments, George, in the playoff battle over the weekend. We've talked about Coventry City losing. We've talked about Bristol City losing as well, as did West Brom, the team in 6th spot. They lost at Norwich. Late winner from Josh Sargent. It was not a classic game, this. Norwich and Torrup seem to have made some conservative changes to try and counteract some of the things that have been tripping them up over the last few weeks. It was kind of weird hybrid 3 at the back formation, which he hasn't done before this season. In this season, with Sorensen playing as a centre-back, certainly out of possession, and then with the ball kind of half in the back 3, half stepping into midfield. It wasn't the most fluent performance from either side, I think it's fair to say, and the goal was absolutely brilliantly taken by Sargent, who just always seems to miss the easy one and take the harder one if he gets 2 chances in a game. But it was a fantastic take from an excellent striker, and Norwich almost did a Norwich and almost conceded a goal after that, but got away with one. A couple of close range efforts from West Brom managed to stay out. So, I've written Norwich off. They're winless in 4 before this one, and it felt like the playoffs were too far off. And then you have a week like this where 3 of the teams above them lose. They get a win, and it's 5 points with 7 left. Still absolutely doable, but they need to not have any more slip-ups. Middlesbrough are the real winners, I'd say, of the playoff weekend, George. They're now level on points with Boro in 6th. 3 goals between them in terms of goal difference. They came from behind to beat Oxford United.
So I was on a flight flying back from holiday in Portugal, and it was one of those flights that all football fans really dread, especially when you work covering these games, because it means there's much more work to do when you touch down. And anyway, I got signal with about 5 minutes to go, and saw the score, and then looked at how the game had gone, and my heart sank, because it's another case of Oxford taking the lead away from home through Michal Elek and then losing the game 2-1, which is exactly what happened away at Hull in our last away game. And then watching the game back, this was... it's a game where, on the balance of play, Boro, because of their second half performance, and their territory and the way they turned the screw, when the winner came from Borges, it had been coming. It was a great finish. But the chances that Oxford missed will make us fans very frustrated that we weren't able to go in at half time in an even more dominant position than a 1-0 lead. Shemi Plaheta missed a really good chance. It was a great save from Travers. At 0-0, Matt Phillips missed yet another very good chance with the ball kind of coming to him in the back post. Like, he didn't realise he was going to get there 4 yards out and kind of diverted it wide of the goal. Kieran Brown had a good chance, which he kind of shanked into the keeper's hands. All these came at 0-0. It's worth pointing that out. And obviously goals do change games. And, when the goal came, Elek. It was from a long throw, which seems to be Oxford's best way of attacking at the moment. Volks's throws causing absolute carnage, and the ball fell to Elek, who struck it well into the back of the net from the edge of the box. But after that, Oxford retreated and didn't offer much of an attacking threat again. And there's a kind of a big disagreement within. Well, I think most Oxford fans feel like this continued tactic of setting up to defend when defending a lead is what's costing us points. And I don't really know where I sit on that, because I also think that it's just not likely that you are going to be 1-0 up away from home at Middlesbrough and you're in the position that Oxford are in and just continue to throw men forward, because then you're just going to get picked off. I don't really know where I stand. I think again it's a massive results-based narrative where, had Oxford seen the game out, sitting back and defending, you'd say it was the perfect away performance and great rearguard action. So who can say? Boro were horrendous from a defensive point of view in the first half, but turned around in the second half.
They are currently playing with a back four of Dyke Steele, Johnny Howson, Neto Borges and Sam Milling Jr. So that's their second choice right back, their third choice central midfielder, probably fourth choice actually, their starting left back at centre back, and a winger at left back. Yeah.
Although Sam Milling Jr. did tell me that he sees himself playing for England at left back when I met him at George Park the other day.
Two nice deliveries. The first one was an absolutely brilliant
really
cross.
Good balls. Yeah. I mean, he's someone whose quality, given his pedigree, having played Juventus previously, and the fact that Aston Villa signed him from Juventus, shows how highly rated he is, and he's played through the England youth groups as well. I don't think Boro fans had been overly enamoured with his performances since joining in January up until Saturday, but he was the key creator on the left-hand side.
I definitely think left-back is where he should focus his attention, because I think he's clearly got some nice, direct speed, 1v1 ability at his best, I think. I'm just not convinced that he looks hugely consistent on that front. And I think there is something in players of his profile, it sounds boring to say, but probably actually focusing on playing fullback, because they could probably take their career a little bit further based on the skill set that he has. He's obviously, physically he's impressive. He's a pretty big guy. There's no reason why he couldn't be a decent 1v1 defender as well. I haven't seen enough to know whether he is or not. I wonder if you probably maybe didn't appreciate with your yellow glasses on the rather sweet moment where Kelechi Iheanacho, who has had an even tougher time of things since joining Boro, and who had a pretty tough first half, in particular when Boro were losing a lot. It was Iheanacho again being brought up as being one of the key reasons. When he did score from that brilliant Milling Jr. cross, Tommy Conway did it was almost condescending how much he hugged Iheanacho and ruffled his hair, and how emotional Iheanacho looks to have scored a tap in to make it 1-1 against Oxford United, which just shows someone like him. I think part of the reason he's getting stick, as I see it, is because we recognise him as having had a Premier League career, because we recognise him as someone who, is probably not striving to be the best they can be, because maybe they're on their way down and things aren't as good as, things aren't panning out the way that they wanted. But, a reminder of the humanity of a footballer and how difficult it is to be in tough situations with how emotional he looked.
It's also worth pointing out that he's a bit of a rarity these days, where he came to Manchester City in 2014. So when he was 18, he was at City till 2017, and then he's been at Leicester since 2017 up until last summer. So he's a guy who's basically only played for two clubs through into his late 20s, and has been successful. At City he was a bit of a golden boy. Didn't work out there, but then at Leicester obviously he had a really good time in the Premier League, and then ended up being part of the squad that won the league last season. So, for his move to Sevilla not to work out, to then drop down on loan to a league where he thought he was probably too good for last season for much of it, and won the league, and to struggle, I can understand why it would take its toll mentally on someone who's had a pretty stable career up to this point. And he hit the bar just before half time as well. For Boro, this was again, they probably had to win in order to these games are games they're going to have to win if they're going to get into the playoffs. For Oxford, the general feeling amongst the fan base is pretty negative. In my mind, again, I think it's a game where we've gone toe-to-toe against a side much better than us, and we've been touched off by a solitary goal. And if we carry on playing at this level, I think points are probably going to come at some point, even though the fixture just doesn't look overly appealing.
Yeah, well, it didn't help the feeling in the fan base, I imagine, that there were some big winners beneath Oxford in the table. Just on the playoff battle, Watford had a great chance at home to Argyle to put a bit more pressure on the top six, particularly with teams losing above them, but couldn't capitalise, drawing 0-0 with Argyle. I mean, didn't start the game well at all. Argyle probably the brighter in the first half an hour, and then Watford started to warm up a little bit. A couple of chances for Vakun Bayo. I gather he got a fair amount of stick, which is kind of understandable. One of them in particular was a very, very good chance. Some of them were a little harder, I think, than maybe he was being given credit for. Certainly one short-range headed attempt, which had taken a nick off a defender right in front of him. But, you know, it's pretty glaring when chances are being created for one guy and he is quite consistently missing them. Watford hadn't had a shot until first half stoppage time, which is why I suggest that their ability to kick off quickly and strongly and get in front and take the game to Argyle wasn't great and pretty unimpressive all round. It's not that helpful for either side, obviously with Argyle with a lot of ground to make up. There's an interesting chat on the squad because Connor Hazard, the Argyle keeper, was booked for time wasting, and there was sort of some suggestion that, like, if you're bottom of the league with a big points gap to overcome, surely you can't be getting booked for time wasting. But then equally, a 0-0 draw at Watford, particularly when you're under the cosh for much of the second half, in the moment, does it feel like the natural thing to do to try and get a point? It's kind of an interesting one to chew on.
It's also, it's not just trying to get a point. It's in order to keep the game. If you're a team who, like Plymouth Argyle, the best way of winning away at Watford is to stay in the game as long as possible. So I kind of think there's probably elements where you should time waste early. Just as long as you keep it at 0-0, then late in the game, if you can break up at the pitch and score, then it's important. So yeah, I think fair play.
Sheffield Wednesday couldn't capitalise either.
It's literally not fair play. But apart from that, yes.
A 1-1 draw between Cardiff and Sheffield Wednesday. This is definitely not the Wednesday kind of finally getting through their really tough fixtures and finally saying, yes, we might still have a say in this playoff battle. Cardiff, the better side, certainly in the first half and ahead. A really nicely taken goal from Isaac Davies. It was notable that Beadle was dropped for Sheffield Wednesday, replaced by Piers Charles. A lot of fans have been calling that. Beadle's made quite a few errors and just hasn't looked very assured over the last few months in particular. And in Piers Charles, they have a really interesting young goalkeeper who's starting for Northern Ireland already at such a young age. He's the brother of Shay Charles, who they also have, albeit Charles is a Wednesday player permanently rather than on loan, but also has a background, as Shay does, in the Manchester City youth team. Just 19 years of age and started here. He's a little undersized, I will say, for a goalkeeper, and that's quite, it's quite visible. He didn't even get anywhere near Davis's shot, which was, hard and low into the corner, but Charles was kind of stuck in the middle of his goal there, and for a few chances in the second half, it did look like takes a bit more time for him to get across to shots in the corners, but didn't do much wrong outside of that. And he has developed a reputation for being someone with a very expansive passing range as well, which could benefit the team. Ihikwe equalised for them from a set piece, and just a continuation of an issue for Cardiff City, who have given away the largest share of their leads of any team in the Championship this season. So I think they've scored the first goal 22 times, and 13 times they've given away that lead. And it's something we've looked at, actually, a new piece of content and a new series that we're doing for a freshly launched Welsh sports news site called Dragon Sports. We're going to be working with them and providing some coverage of Cardiff and Swansea and Wrexham and Newport County in some weekly videos for them. And we looked at Cardiff this week and specifically tried to understand this issue that they have where they're actually playing pretty well to start games, Cardiff. I really believe that. And, in 2025 so far, I think 9 teams have picked up fewer points than them, picked up some quite good results. I can't shake this feeling that half of the time they're quite good, Cardiff, and then half of the time you just cannot trust them, and they're just constantly shooting themselves in the foot. And I think it has to be some sort of mentality issue, potentially some sort of just general club culture issue, as it's not been a great few years for them and they've been just kind of floundering somewhat and chopping and changing. I feel like Reza, he's so front-footed in press conferences. He really wants to try and and be this like talismanic leader of the club, but it doesn't seem to be working particularly when it comes to the resolve of the team. Again, they are starting games looking pretty good, pretty bright, pretty lively. Got this young, energetic group of attacking players playing behind Salek, who's obviously been great. And I think there's lots to be positive about, quite frankly, probably more than I'd realised. But at half time, I sent the screenshot of the FOTMob page of the shot map, Cardiff dominant, and I said, when you see this, you don't expect to feel like, I bet you the other team come back into this game. But that's what I did expect to happen. That's what did happen. 1-1 draw between these two teams. So what did it mean down at the very bottom? Well, Argyle drawing, as mentioned, and Derby without a game this weekend meant that Luton were the big winners in terms of the bottom three, and they're now 2 points off of safety. They went to Hull and they won. This was a huge result and secured in just ridiculous circumstances. With early in the second half, long ball forward, Carlton Morris winning a big flick on, Adebayo with a fairly loose touch, and Coyle went to clear the ball away for Hull and absolutely smashed it off of Alfie Jones, flew into the corner, goalkeeper completely wrong-footed by just complete shenanigans, basically, George. And then there's this group of teams down at the bottom where, like, they just can't help tripping themselves up at different points. And in this instance, God knows it's been Luton plenty of times this season. In this instance, it was Hull. And in this instance, it means that Luton get back-to-back away wins, 10 points in their last 5 games, their best run of the season so far. And narratives are just flipping left, right and centre. Luton now feeling like they're hunting the teams above them down and feeling good about it.
Yeah, I mean, for Hull, who, off the back of their win against Oxford, the 2-1 win, to pick up 1 point from the next 2 games, to lose at home to Luton, after that game of fun, they were kind of out of it, and then obviously sucked back in again. As you say, the goal itself was just a total freak goal. It was actually quite a nice move. It was a good flick on from Morris, a nice kind of flick afterwards from Adebayo into the path of who was it? It was Asgard running onto it before the clearance was made. But this is why, when we talk about who's going to get relegated, who's do you think it's going to go down, it's going to get decided by moments like this. I mean, maybe not quite as mad as a clearance being deflected into the goal off someone's face, but the margins are so tight that it's going to come down to just a couple of chances and who takes them. And right now, Luton are the side who for so long weren't taking their chances, for so long were struggling. They were either playing poorly, losing games, or playing okay and losing games. And they've seemed to, just in the last couple of weeks, that seems to have turned, which itself could just be a bit of variance where luck is, things are falling their way again rather than falling against them. Whether they can maintain 2 points per game from here to the end of the season, we'll see. I think it's probably unlikely. But there's no denying that they're the team with the quality in their side who, if they can get up a bit of a head of steam, then they could ease clear pretty comfortably. This is the game, this is a 12:30 kickoff, so we hadn't taken off yet. And as a team in this battle, me and my brother were talking before the game, saying, what do we want to happen? And he was saying, kind of any result's fine. And I was like, no, the one thing that cannot happen is Luton to win, because we've got to basically relegate them as fast as possible. They're the team who are detached right now, and this result, yes, it keeps Hull in it, but it just means that they're, rather than relegate Luton as fast as we can, it means Luton are now, closing the gap really quickly. And yeah, Argyle, it looks unlikely they're going to find their way into it, but it's 2 spots rather than 1 now. There's no question about it.
And Stoke found their way above Oxford United as well with a big win, 3-1 win at home to a QPR team that are looking very undercooked at the moment, but take nothing away from what was quite an exciting performance with some great goals.
Yeah, QPR have to be very careful here. They are absolutely not out of this at all. They have a home game against Cardiff on Saturday, and that's huge because and then they go to Oxford on Wednesday. Obviously, it's probably, in terms of their expected points from those 2 games, it's good to be playing teams around you. But if they drop points, or dare I even say lose both of those games, they're going to be right in the thick of this relegation battle. And based on their performance here on Saturday, they're not playing well at all. Stoke were by far the better side, completely deserving of their 3 points, taking the lead relatively early in the first half, and just the kind of the better side throughout. We haven't really seen this kind of performance from Mark Robbins' side since he took over Stoke very regularly. But yeah, by Shamado and then just after the break, Manhoef scoring 3 really well taken goals. And and QPR not really getting into it before a goal relatively late. So, yeah, again, Stoke, another side who've looked desperately poor for long periods, putting in the kind of performance here where you're like, well, if they do that again, then they're probably going to be okay. I think listeners can probably tell that I'm getting pretty exasperated by all of these sides who look really bad, who are below Oxford and then suddenly playing really well. But this is how it's going right now.
Desperately reaching out and trying to drag QPR down with you as well.
They are. There's no anyone who thinks QPR aren't in this. As I say, purely because of the games they've got. Because it's Cardiff and Oxford, if they drop points in those games, or as I say, if they lose both of the games, then you've got two sides there who are going to be, Oxford would draw level with them on points and Cardiff will be just behind. So the way that they're playing right now, how
about 8 defeats in their last 11? How about 5 defeats in their last 6? It's very, very ugly. I mean, the starting 11 looks like an absolute mess. As I've tried to say quite a few times, I just think for whatever reason over the last few years in terms of how they've shaped their squad, they just end up with they've got so little depth. I just don't really back the depth that QPR have, and gets laid bare when Steve Cook's out and Ilias Chair's out and Michael Frey's out. All of a sudden, the team looks about as pretty much the worst starting 11 in the league, with a couple of absences. And it was certainly reflected in a poor performance as well. Lastly, Portsmouth 1, Blackburn 0. Certainly one of the worst games of the weekend, this. We did see a lovely goal early on. Colby Bishop with a little flick into Murphy, who found the corner. But Pompey didn't overstretch themselves to win this game, I think it's fair to say. Just 3 shots in total for them. Blackburn with some half chances, but very little to get excited about on the Blackburn front as well. What's been a horrendous month, really. 4 defeats in a row. A difficult week off the pitch as well, or at least a newsworthy week off the pitch might be a better way to describe it. Was reported across lots of national media this letter that had been written by a number of fan groups towards the ownership and the CEO and the head of football operations, Rudy Justed, in which they said, having grown frustrated at a perceived lack of leadership and communication from the board and the owners Venky's, as well as growing off-field concerns. They asked basically this group of those running the club not to go to Ewood Park, not to go and watch games, because they believe their presence has become a source of division for many supporters. Now the club acknowledged it. The fans are basically saying, and we're explicit in saying, the Rao family are not keeping their pledge to respect the Jack Walker legacy, which the wider football community understands. As a result of this, there is a growing sentiment that Jack Walker's legacy is slowly being eroded, resulting in increasing desire for new ownership. And those that were targeted, those in charge, basically acknowledged it and said, yeah, no, we're still going to go to these games though. We see that as quite an important part of our roles. And thanks, but yeah, no, we're going to go. It's just an interesting situation, Ishmael. I think I've framed it when he walked in as look, if you're an optimist, you'd see it as a great chance to take Blackburn into the playoffs from the position that they were in, 6th or 7th when he took over. You have a good dozen games, suddenly you're in the playoffs, you've got a chance of being a Premier League manager. And instead, which was also something that seemed entirely likely, was that the team would drop off, and such a pronounced drop off would lead to quite a lot of anger within the fan base, and the realization that it's another season that has shown some promise that's been extinguished quite dramatically towards the end of the campaign. And that's when, these clear issues off the field get heightened and get, become more newsworthy and more targeted. I mean, I now look at their January transfer business, where they brought in 6 players, Blackburn, which I don't think was really discussed very much. Yuri Ribeiro, Adam Forshaw, Emmanuel Dennis on loan, Dion Sarnason on loan, Corley Woodrow on loan, Augustus Cargbo, permanent signing from Cesena. I mean, I dread to think the wages that they've added to the squad with those players, and barely had any impact whatsoever. Very tough end to the season, I imagine, for Blackburn, and that ownership situation, which I think for many neutrals, it's not something that you're constantly being reminded of. It's not something that's constantly in the news or that you're necessarily aware of. But Venky's and Blackburn Rovers has been going on for over a decade now, and it makes it feel like, well, it's been going on for over a decade now, and the club's looks broadly fine. But I definitely think it's something that could start to rear its head more and more over the next few months, and hopefully it doesn't.